So another really important social movement that is given birth to by this early modern era is the birth of modern feminism. Now, feminism is not a new thing in the tradition of human history since the establishment of patriarchal societies going back to the classical era. Women have, in many different ways and forms, tried to reestablish themselves socially, economically, and politically. Um, Now, patriarchy has flourished, and in many cases, it has drowned out or it has actively sought to silence women and their opinions and their influence. Um, but throughout human history, women have occupied different roles in society. They have occupied positions of power at different times. We talked about under the Mongols how women saw more equality in pastoralist societies because of the nature of the society. We talked about in the last unit how the slave trade in West Africa creates opportunities for women to exert themselves in opportunities that had previously not existed. But feminism, as we now know it as a movement, is generally born out of the Enlightenment movement in Western Europe in 16th, 17th, 18th century. Um, as Enlightenment philosophy begins to challenge traditional roles of the church, they begin to challenge traditional roles of monarchy and political authority. Many women see themselves as being left out of this rush to equality. Mary Wollstonecraft is one of the first and loudest voices in this movement that if all people are born with natural rights that cannot be violated, then why are women left out of this equation as well? And many of these Enlightenment philosophers, who are some of the strongest advocates for male suffrage and male equality, openly deny these opportunities to women. And certain women like Wollstonecraft, like Olympia de Gouges, in the United States, women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton begin to give voice to this feminist movement, which pushes for women to be given the same opportunities as men and begins to push for a greater role, not outside of the home for women in society. Now, the growth of feminism coincides with two other important movements. Probably the most important movement to feminism is the rise of industrialization, which we're going to talk about in the next unit. So you see during the 19th century, as industrialization spreads through Western Europe, as it spreads through the Americas, as it makes a limited impact in Asia as well, women begin to see more opportunities outside of the home. Um, One of the biggest factors to this is the move for free public education in the 19th century. As the Industrial Revolution pulls both men and women out of the home to work in industrial factories, childcare becomes a major concern of the middle and the working class. And as industrial labor becomes more complex and as machines and their management and their creation becomes more vital to the industrial system, a more highly educated workforce is necessary. So many of these industrialized countries begin to push for free public education, and girls are included in that as well, which begins early on the process of giving them at least an equal opportunity to men in primary education, even if they are still excluded at the higher levels of secondary education. Um, Also, this increased literacy among young girls within several generations leads to the expansion of universities and secondary education into accepting females into their universities and into their colleges, which again opens up more opportunities for women to take on leading roles in politics, in industry, in the sciences and technology field. Also, in the early and middle parts of the 19th century, you also see a increase in democratic processes. Even if you don't see the rise of democratic governments, in many of these Western European countries, people begin to push for democratic institutions. They begin to push for limited monarchy. They begin to push for the formation of elected governing bodies like a parliament or a Congress. And this opens the door again to women participating in politics. They begin to join political parties, they begin to join protest movements, social movements. They begin to found and join charitable organizations like the Red Cross and things like that as well, which again gives them avenues into social and cultural influence that they had not had in the prior centuries. Now, also at this time, as the feminist movement is organizing itself in the United States and Western Europe, as they're organizing themselves into suffrage movements, culturally, women begin to see their influence increase as well. This also coincides with a artistic and cultural movement in Western Europe and the United States known as Romanticism. And in Romanticism, a voice is given to feminist topics. This is where you begin to see female authors not only begin to be published, but also begin to become top selling authors. You have Charlotte and Emily Bronte. You see, this is the era of authors like Emily Dickinson. And this romanticism movement, which rejects the logic and the hardline reasoning of the Enlightenment and gives credence to emotion, and it gives credence to the beauty and the stopping and smelling the roses of human life, is an opportunity for female and feminist topics to begin being publicly accepted in art, in literature, and so forth. Things like birth control, things like family planning, child support, female sexuality, wage discrepancy, begin to make their way into popular literature, and from there become social and public topics that haven't had a voice in several centuries.